Hello everyone, today I'm going to be giving you my review of the Marvel Legends Retro X-Men Spiral figure. Now, as you'll notice with the packaging, this is a nostalgic look back to the style that Toy Biz used to employ when they held the license all the way back in the very early 90s and they produced X-Men figures. So I really like this nostalgic look back, I really like this card art, I like what they've tried to do with this. It definitely speaks to me because I was a collector, well I say collector, I was a kid playing with these toys back in the early 90s, so I have very warm feelings towards them. So I love this approach, I love this retro line, but I have to say I think Spiral was a character that actually never made it into that original lineup of Toy Biz figures from those very early days. So this is something of an imagining or reimagining of what that figure might have looked like in that packaging. To date, amazingly, we've only ever had one other Spiral in the Marvel Legends line, and this is from the early days of when Hasbro first took over the license for Marvel Legends, and I think even Hasbro would acknowledge that this was an uneven time for the line, and the results were certainly very mixed. But from what I can tell, this original Spiral was actually a pretty nice figure all in all, but it was very, very difficult to pick up, especially in the UK. So a reissue and updated version of this figure is long overdue, especially because she is such a fan favourite and I've always wanted one in my collection, so I'm really pleased that we finally got one just in time for the 60th anniversary of the X-Men. And if we flip the packaging, we can see a little bit of bio about the character. Again, the design is very similar to what we used to see on the old card art of the Toy Biz years. And then on the right hand side, we can see the other figures that were released as part of this wave, which is really cool. Of course, we can see the Wolverine, the Dark Phoenix, and many others. Now, a character like this is always going to be a challenge to a company like Hasbro because this figure obviously has 6 arms. And we can see from their experimentation in the past with characters like the Doppelganger, this is quite tricky to pull off. But I have to say here, in terms of the overall aesthetic and look, it looks seamless. I think they've done an absolutely fantastic job with this. This looks really good. This looks comic book accurate. It looks perfectly in proportion with itself, and it looks kind of natural in a strange way, if you know what I mean. You'll also notice she's actually got the double joints in the arms, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But all in all, this looks pretty good. The only thing I would criticise it for is that there's sadly just no shading whatsoever. There's no real paint apps been applied to this. Yes, the silver looks nice on the gauntlets and on the armbands where they are. Obviously that metal arm looks really nice, but on the actual main body itself there's just no shading and it's just cast in that plastic blue, which it looks very nice and attractive. I'm not really criticising it that much, but it would have been nice just to have a little bit more texture, especially on that plastic belt, which is a separate loose piece. If they just put a bit of shading into that or some more paint apps to make that look a bit more textured, a bit more realistic, then that would have been really cool. The head sculpt is really very nice. I like the approach they've taken with this. Obviously, it is all sculpted in, so that helmet doesn't come off, but that's just as well because this all looks nicely in proportion. So I think they've done a nice job of painting this. You can see the little details of like the eyelashes around the eyes there. Everything's neatly applied. I think this looks really good. Again, if I was being critical, it would have been nice if they had a little bit more of a wash running through the hair itself and maybe some more detailing on the actual helmet in terms of the paint apps. But all in all, this looks really very nice. Now, if we look at the reverse, we can see the back of the hair there, and as I said, again, you know, it's sculpted nicely, but it's a very hard plastic, so it is going to definitely impinge on the articulation, as we'll see a little bit later. But again, if it just had a little bit more of a wash running through it, this would have given it a lot more texture and made it look a little less plastic-like and a little bit more realistic. If we look at the legs, this looks like a brand new piece to me in these lower legs. I like these sort of like fairy flares that she's got. This looks really cool. Again, it would have been nice to have a wash running through this just to give it a bit more texture, but the actual sculpting and the look of it is actually really nice. So let's look at the articulation. As I said, that headpiece is going to have some real difficulties. As you can see, you can kind of just turn it from side to side. There is a ball joint here, but you're not really going to get a huge range of motion out of it because that solid hairpiece is a massive hindrance. Now, the arms do all have ball joints. They do all lift up, and this is quite cleverly done, so you can actually get a good range of motion. As you can see, there's actually plenty of space between each of these ball joints, and it looks fairly seamless and allows a good amount of movement, which is brilliant and unexpected, to be honest. Now, she does have double jointed elbows, so this is something of a first, I think, for the female characters, so really appreciate that they've done this rather than just having a single pin swivel that you usually get. This is really nice. Of course, there is that pin swivel at the wrist there, so that rotates all the way around and hinges forwards and backwards as you'd expect. There's a ball joint in the upper torso, so that will allow her to lean from side to side and bend forwards and backwards as you would expect, and of course she can also move from side to side as well. So no real real surprises here. This is what we've seen on many other of the female characters in recent years, but this works really well. Now, there's ball joints in the hips, which are nicely disguised, so she can kick her legs out to the side. There's an upper thigh swivel as well, so you can move that upper leg all the way around. Then the legs, of course, will kick forwards, they'll kick backwards, and there's a double joint at the knee. And then finally, there is an ankle pivot there as well, so that foot will move forwards and backwards a little bit in terms of that hinge, and it will kind of lean from left to right, but it is hindered a little bit by those plastic fairy cuffs. Thankfully, Hasbro haven't forgotten that this character should come fully loaded, and they've given her a great many accessories, including an extra pair of left hands, 4 katana swords, her broadsword, and this axe. And when she's fully kitted out, she looks pretty formidable. Now, I think these are all really nice accessories, they're perfectly character appropriate, and they look really fun, and it creates a lot of different diverse looks and poses you can put her in that make her really dynamic and interesting visually. The only criticism I have for some of these swords and various weapons is that they're a little bit lacking again when it comes to the paint apps. The actual katanas I think you get away with because that silver paint is so nicely done, but some of the shading, particularly on the axe for example, just looks, well, it's just moulded plastic, and it would have been nice if just been some shading here, some paint apps just give it a bit more texture, make it look a little bit more realistic I suppose. But that said, all in all, this looks pretty cool. I think they've done a very nice job of it, and I think this is quite an impressive look for this character for sure. So final thoughts from me, well, I'm going to give this figure 4 stars. So I think all in all, this is a really nice figure. I'm very grateful to Hasbro for actually producing another Spiral, because it's been a long time and I've had that gap in my collection for a great number of years now that I've wanted to fill. So I'm very glad to finally have an updated Spiral. I think this is a really nice figure. I think overall the articulation is good. The overall presentation is pretty nice as well. She looks really good, and I love the number of accessories she comes with. But when I consider some of the issues I've mentioned in the video, such as the lack of articulation in the head, which to some extent might be unavoidable, perhaps they could have used a different kind of plastic or rubber for that head to allow more movement, I don't know. And then also we think about the lack of paint apps that could have been used, just a bit more shading to just enhance what is a pretty fantastic sculpt all in all, would have really pushed this figure over the top. So for me, I have to remove a star for that, but all in all, this is a really solid figure, and if you don't have a Spiral, you go and get it, because I think this is a really nice addition to the line. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like, and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.